Welcome to a homes near you. I've just finished my Ocarina of Time randomizer, which means I've spent a lot of time in all of the dungeons from the game. So let's rank them and find out which are good and which are better still. Number 11. Inside Jabu-Jabu's belly. It's a good dungeon, but we're working at such a high level here that a good dungeon was gonna have to fill last spot no matter what. It is kinda disturbing, which is good for the theme, but still a bit gross. The Ruto mechanic is an intriguing gameplay device that gets a bit tedious, and there's nothing all that memorable on show here. That's the key. While everything about this game is memorable, this dungeon is one of the least notable aspects of it. The music does suit the mood, but it's simply a drum machine, 2 chords, and some gargly sounds. The midway boss is a midway boss, and a bit of a wild goose chase or wild octo chase. I do think the disappearance of Ruto at this point is quite interesting, but something has to finish last, so sorry Jabu-Jabu. It's 11th for you. Number 10. Bottom of the Well. Brilliantly disturbing and great theme-wise, but it's just so short. You can be in and out in 5 minutes, so hard to place it any higher than dungeons with so much more depth. That's dungeon design-wise, as the well is pretty far underground. The windmill hut stuff is a stroke of gameplay genius, and it works as a perfect precursor to the Shadow Temple. I actually think it would have been cool and entirely possible for the well to connect to the Shadow Temple in some way, perhaps bringing you out into the temple as a child, giving you a glimpse of it but not allowing you to progress in any way. It makes sense for a secret passageway to exist, but who am I to suggest ways to improve this impeccable game? 10th place for the bottom of the well, just because it's quite light on material. Number 9. The Ice Cavern. Like pretty much all the dungeons, the Ice Cavern hits its theme to a T, but it just gets a bit annoying at times. Sliding around on the ice, getting frozen by enemies, and pushing blocks around may fit the theme, but it also makes for some quite tedious gameplay at times. It's also pretty light on material, like Bottom of the Well, so hard to place it any higher. It does beat out Bottom of the Well because at least there's a little bit more to see and do here besides run in, kill a weirdo, and then run out again. The Ice Wolf is pretty cool, and Blue Fire is interesting as a concept. 9th place. Number 8. Ganons Castle. I had a real hard time choosing between 7th and 8th for this one. As much as I love Ganons Castle, you do expect a little bit more from a final level, especially if playing Ocarina of Time after future Zelda titles. It's a tale of 2 halves, this one. The first is a little underwhelming and sometimes slightly odd, as certain features don't seem to link up with that specific temple's themes all that well. However, the second half is perfect. Climbing higher up the tower, facing progressively harder foes that act like guard dogs for Ganon along the way. The final ascent up the staircase as Ganon's haunting organ gets louder and louder is as epic as it gets. But as I've said, in this game, the dungeons are so strong that the weaker half lets the side down for Ganon's Castle. 7th place, inside the Deku Tree. Deku Tree does its job perfectly. A great tutorial dungeon that strikes the balance of show and tell by introducing several key gameplay mechanics and enemies. It's nothing crazy memorable, but it doesn't need to be. This dungeon is all about teaching you how to play the game, and it does it as well as any other opening dungeon in the series. An often overlooked feature of the dungeon is its use of height and how well that fits with the idea of being inside a giant tree. It's a long, thin boy, and you can't go wrong with those. 6th place for Dodongo's Cavern. The strongest child dungeon for me perfectly expands on the Deku Tree. The cinematic when you bomb open the first door and see the main chamber is your first real glimpse of the sheer scale of the dungeons in this game, and the fact you can see the giant skull of a dead Dodongo is enough to get you at least a little anxious about what you might face here. The way the dungeon then weaves this into progression, bombing the eyes of the skull to open its mouth, just really cool. As is the bombing of the staircase cinematic. Yes, lots of cool bomb moments here. I do just generally think that the more impressive dungeons come later on in the game though. That's why 6th place for Dodongo's Cavern. Number 5, the Water Temple. You might have been waiting to see where I've placed the infamous Water Temple, and I'm sure that every time I announce that 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 are not the Water Temple, it may have got you questioning me. Well, I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that the Water Temple is unfairly criticised, and I disagree that the famous hidden key or the water level intervals are major flaws. Yes, the dungeon punishes errors severely in terms of backtracking and time, but you messed up. You missed it. It's on you. The only reason people complain about this is because other dungeons in the game are comparatively very forgiving in this regard. The only gripe I do agree with though is that the Iron Boots pause menu debacle is hugely frustrating. They really should have set the boots and the Ocarina to the D-pad and all this would have been solved. I'd maybe even move the Water Temple up a place if this was done. Cinematically and thematically brilliant, I feel a sense of haunting anxiety in this place, in part due to its infamy, but also due to the immersion. Dark Link is an all-time Zelda boss fight, and I love the moment his magic fades and the room returns to normal. I'd even argue that in terms of dungeon design, this is one of the game's most innovative. 4th place, Fire Temple. I was very close at times to moving the Fire Temple onto the podium, but it just misses out on a place in the top 3 due to the sheer volume of cinematic, memorable moments that the top 3 have to offer. The Fire Temple has some great gameplay devices, for example saving the imprisoned Gorons, which is not only a creative way to hunt keys, but also adds an extra layer of impetus and pressure. You've got to save your Goron brothers before they get eaten alive. The dungeon does a great job of creating a sense of height as you climb through Death Mountain and balance on thin beams with huge drops. And of course, it hits the fire theme on the head. I do understand that the original theme song had to be removed on religious and cultural grounds, but boy did it add to the dungeon. 3rd place, the Shadow Temple. The Shadow Temple was never realistically going to challenge the top 2, it's far too linear for that. And if I did this list a few years ago, it would be nowhere near this high because I was terrified of it as a kid. Wouldn't even go in. Now though, it's a creepy work of art. I love lore and mysterious backstories, and this temple has tons of this, with some subtle and some not so subtle nods to the awful deeds of Hyrule's past. Here, the lines between good and evil are blurred, possibly for the first time in the game. You realise the royal family are not all they are cracked up to be, and whilst they are pretty decent for Hyrule now, they weren't always so. The haunting creepiness of this dungeon sends shivers down the spine, and you feel inches away from a gruesome death at any turn. The dungeon builds to a cinematic climax as you take to the shadow boat and set off on the invisible Sea of the Dead, and then shoot down the bridge with fire arrows. This dungeon is on the podium because it looks so good and feels so damn creepy, but doesn't challenge the top 2 because of its linearity. 2nd place, the Forest Temple. Oh, it hurts to put this second so close between the top 2. This dungeon is all about atmosphere. It's created by the sparse, desolate layout and the music, and it's backed up with so many epic spectacles like the falling chessboard room. I love the idea of the Poe pictures, the ghostly spirits watching you from the safety of a picture frame and cackling as you stroll by. I love the intrigue surrounding the origins of the temple. There are some great theories that the boss room was once a gateway to the sacred realm, and the temple was built as a huge fortification to protect it. The twisted hallways are gothic brilliance, as are the shadows that fall from the ceiling. Cheers for the heads up, Navi. As you might guess from my water temple section, I think the placement of the first key is a good thing and teaches you to keep your wits about you in your first adult temple. I mentioned music earlier, and you'll know how important it is to me if you've seen my love letter video, and there's not many dungeon themes better, apart from maybe 1st place, the Spirit Temple. You heard my pain at having to put the Forest Temple second, and I deliberated for so long over which order to place the top 2 in, but I've given the edge to the Spirit Temple because so many things fall into place to make this the best dungeon in the game. The fact that the game intends for this to be the final dungeon is perfect, because it takes so much work to reach it, and it feels like the most distant, the most hidden away at the far ends of the haunted wastelands, seemingly untouched by outsiders for thousands of years. The dungeon is the only one that truly makes the most of the time travel mechanic by providing you with a mirrored layout, one for child Link and one for adult Link, with both sides culminating in a colossal central chamber complete with a statue of the goddess of the sand, a replica of the even larger structure that the temple is built within. The theme of reflection is manifested once again in the Mirror Shield, and Nibiru's storyline and the boss battle reveal add another nuance to the temple. And of course, the music is perfect, the Eastern influence once again fully immersing you in this brilliant dungeon, and in my opinion, it's probably the best temple in the Zelda franchise. Well, thank you so much for watching this video that ranks the dungeons from Ocarina of Time. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Write your opinions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Do give me a like, do give me a subscribe, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Speak to you soon.